Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. This is the first webinar of the new BHN webinar series following a short break over the summer. So super pleased that you can all join us for a discussion on operational strategies during challenging times. My name's Eloise Hanson. I'm the editor of hospitality for Boutique Hotel News, and we are an online multimedia platform that covers the global boutique, lifestyle, and luxury hotel industry. Our sponsor of this new webinar series is Alliance, a hospitality customer experience platform, and we have a short video to play for you today. And further details on Alliance have been popped into the chat if you would like to learn more. So let's meet our speakers today, and I'm going to move from left to right as how our speakers are presented on your screens, and I'm going to ask each to introduce themselves very briefly, which means I'm going to be kickstarting with Alex. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invite. It's a pleasure to be here today with you guys. Okay, I'm Alex Sogno. We founded the Global Asset Solution about 16 years ago. We're a hotel asset management company specialized in luxury hotels across the world, mostly in Europe, Middle East, and Asia. We have everything from Ritz-Carltons to Four Seasons to Rosewood hotels. And it's fantastic to be here, and I will stay short. So nice to meet you.
Thank you, Alex. Peter, coming to you next, please.
Well, good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are in the world here. My name is Peter Twalkman. I serve as the CEO for Lark Hotels. Lark is it's an independent group. We are a brand, a management company, a design group as well. Predominantly in the Northeast of the U.S., but we're down the Eastern Seaboard, through Florida, Texas, out in California. We have about 55 locations, about half under our brand, and then half that sort of fly under their own independent flag. We typically work on smaller assets, sort of down really small, sort of 6 rooms up to about 95 rooms, and have a collection of F&B in about half those locations as well. I think that's a good start. We'll keep moving here.
Thank you, Peter. And Pierre, coming to you next, please.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Pierre Ricord. I'm the head of consultancy for hotels for Christie & Co. I supervise a team of 12 experts across Europe. We deal with commercial due diligence, advice to owners and investors in hotels in terms of development. We help as well brand managers, operators in their strategic decision making through their expansion strategy, and we work alongside a valuation division as well as a significant brokerage activity in the UK, but also across Europe, in Germany, Spain, France, and Finland.
Brilliant, thank you, Pierre. And finally, Dina, over to you.
Thanks so much. Well, hello, everybody from the Pacific Northwest of the U.S. It is 6 a.m. my time. I am the COO of Stay Pineapple Hotels. We are a boutique hotel owner, operator, and brand. We have 10 hotels across the United States, and they are all under 150 rooms, not quite as small as Lark's properties, but all located in urban centers. We're very centric on core cities. The brand is also expanding currently to third-party owners. So we're excited to be here.
Thank you, Dina. And all the LinkedIn profiles of our panelists have been popped into the chat, and I actively encourage you to connect and carry on this conversation as we have a lot to get through today. Just to give our audience members a quick overview of how today is going to run, I will spend around 45 minutes in discussion with our panelists today, with some time at the end to take any questions. So this is my call to our audience members today. If you have any questions, please submit these using the chat function or the Q&A function at the bottom of your screens, and I will ask these as and when is appropriate. And just as a reminder, this webinar is being recorded, and the replay will be automatically emailed to everybody that has registered. So if this is the first time that you've joined one of our webinars, I always like to highlight some stories that we've published on Boutique Hotel News and other media sources too, which all give some kind of context or background as to what we're going to be talking about today. And a report published by the Energy and Environment Alliance and Womble Bond Dickinson recently examines how hospitality businesses can deliver the S in ESG. The report focuses on employees, customers, the supply chain, and wider community. And there is a quote from Claire Wilkinson, who's the partner and head of retail and hospitality at Womble, which I think is very pertinent to today's conversation. She said, "In the war for talent and competitive advantage, both employees and customers want to engage with purpose-led organizations that share their values." Other screen grabs on this page show the opportunities presented to owners and operators, and this includes, for example, hotels coming to market, hotels being refurbished for alternative use, such as short-term lets, and even short-term rental property managers now launching hotel connections. Now, on the next slide, these are headlines by other media sources, and something that we will touch on in today's conversation is adjacent parcels. This is neighbouring plots of land, and how some owners are looking at acquiring these plots of land as creative ways to expand. But I know what has been causing some headaches for hoteliers recently is F&B, though perhaps I'd argue that F&B has long been an area of hotel operations that has caused some friction. And I recently read an article about a general manager who was based in India, who used his F&B as a marketing tool and partnered with food festivals to popularize the hotel amongst guests and locals. And he said that it's a profitable partnership due to the growing number of covers that the hotel served during that time. And he also mentioned that increases in selling prices in line with inflation have not deterred customers. So I hope that has provided some context for today's discussion, and we are going to be talking about operational strategies, which means I'm going to be kicking off with a question to Alex, if I may. Alex, could you please provide us with an overview of current owner and operator sentiment? And what I'd like you to focus on here are their top concerns, but also what are they optimistic about?
So one of the things that we see post-COVID, I'm sorry to bring back this, COVID has been a major earthquake for our industry. What we can see is we have some serious labor shortage and a need of talent. So I think that's one of the concerns that operators have, owners have, that's for sure. But what we are telling the operator is to really get some creativity and market, use our marketing department, for example, showing videos of the working environment at the hotel. Also create more commission level. I think in many countries, we need to look at wages, the basic salaries, but we also need to train staff. And sometimes there is very little support or no support from the major corporation, the major operator. And I think this is something that needs to be pushed from the owner side. in order to answer to this shortage. Also, we need to start looking at AI, and this should be coming from the operator, but it's still very limited. We've been telling them that, you know, when you call for room service, this could be managed by AI now. There is lots of inventive ways to use it so we can better manage our pool of labor. And the other thing that we see, especially outside the US, because this trend is well established in the US, is, you know, the operators are growing, and there is limited resources. So before there was more management contract, and now we're seeing, especially in the luxury sector, more franchise model. Especially in Europe, this is becoming quite a norm, and that's very encouraging. On the optimist point that you mentioned, I think what we can see is people now are aware of asset management and the need of asset management, especially, again, outside the US. And now it's, you know, we need, when we enter new portfolio, we have a new portfolio of 9 hotels in the Middle East, and when we, and it's different operators, and the owner didn't have the attention of the operator on the corporate level. And once you arrive and you have talented asset managers that know what they're talking about, there is no more, you know, BS. They need to act, and that's a very positive thing, and they do respond to this. So it's very encouraging. And, you know, another thing that I wanted to mention, that's my last point, is asset management is so diverse. It's not just owner rep, it's also, you know, development for coordinating an opening. It's one type of talent that is very specific. You need to coordinate between the owner, the operator, the contractors. You have also investment asset management, and then pure operational hands-on asset manager. So this is need to be clarified, I think, in the market.
So do you think that the role of the asset manager is shifting, or is it that it's always been diverse and there's an education piece?
I think as this type of work is evolving, there is more and more needs, and people are turning around to us and saying, hey, listen, can you do, for example, a feasibility studies? Before we didn't have that, but now you know, when we were going to the general consultants, we were going there for feasibility studies because they had the data. Now the data is available through the different STR hotstats and everything, so it's easy to do that. So now owners tend to go more and more towards asset manager because they know the reality of the market of a hotel, so they have more adequate response to a developer. So we see a shift in this, definitely.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Pierre, I'm coming to you next, please, and I want you to provide again a general overview of what are the foundations of a strong operational strategy. What does that look like?
I think there's we need to differentiate what could be implemented at hotel level, which I think is more towards initiatives or tactical initiatives, versus what will be an operational strategy as such. I think they obviously need to be extremely connected, as Alex said, with the different parts of the organization, from the ownership and to the management of the hotel on the front line. But ultimately, they respond to slightly different dynamics and different time horizons. So to me, the first thing is a strategy as such is rather long-term, is rather guided by the objectives of the investor or owner, based on, you know, the holding period of the asset, when they want to come in, what they want to achieve, and, you know, in what way they want to leave and exit and create value upon exit. So that's really sort of more asset-led, and then it will be translated in hopefully as specific of a way as possible by function, so everybody's got a clear brief as to how they contribute to the overall strategy, but also wide enough and not too specific, so it allows for ownership and empowerment of the teams to actually translate that strategy through tactical initiatives. And that's the connection to the market. That's the flexibility of a strategy. So to answer your question a little more concisely, I think an operational strategy is somehow medium to long term, and we can define what that means. I think it's a function of ownership more than anything these days. It is specific from the top down, and it is connected throughout the hotel, but it is connected, highly connected to the market, to the environment of the hotel, so it allows flexibility. There's a long-term direction, but enough width in the lane so you can navigate the market, adjust, and still achieve the long-term objectives whilst being pragmatic. I think that the connection to the teams and the various players, as we say, the hotel business used to be an owner-operated business. The owner was, on the ground, welcoming the guest every single day. This area of hospitality has evolved greatly, and now we have a myriad of players and types of hotels and clients, but also stakeholders. And the success to a strategy or any initiative that has to create value for the hotel has to be through very regular and clear and intense communication and connection between all layers and all parties involved. The asset manager, the sometimes third-party manager, the franchise sometimes that is added to the combination of the hotel, the general management, the front line. So connection really is the key, and that's no revolution, but I think this still holds true these days more than anything.
Mm-hmm. Could you talk in greater detail about that connection between a strategy and an initiative? And do you have any sort of concrete examples that you can provide of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and we'd love to think that a strategy is only a very aspirational vision from the leader of the organization. And yes, to a certain extent it is that, but it has to be translated into actual objectives, measurable objectives that can then be shared across the organization with more limited space for interpretation. And I suppose that's an extra way to connect with the teams, whether there are differences across the layer of responsibility across a hotel, from frontline to departmental managers to general managers. I think the regular weekly meeting and thinking as a leader, how do you translate the key objectives or the key foundations of your strategy at your weekly meeting? How are we getting on with the strategy? I don't think that's something we necessarily see everywhere, possibly more in some of the smaller groups, and hopefully Dina and Peter can also share their experience, how they translate their strategy. But I think it's as simple as that. It's possibly even restating the vision. I worked for a period of time at Hilton. The vision, the culture, some of the foundations of the strategy were reiterated very regularly at various meetings, from top management all the way to interaction with frontline staff. So I think just organizing that interaction, whether that's your weekly meeting, your monthly meeting with the asset manager, I think all of those are opportunities to connect the two.
Mm-hmm.
May I have something here, Pierre? I think you're totally right. I think when we start a hotel working on an asset, we always say to the team in front of the owner, we don't work for the owner, we don't work for you, we work for the hotel. If the hotel is successful, the owner is successful, the operator is successful, you guys are getting your bonus and everything. And let's find a strategy and work together in order to find this strategy that we're talking about, and have this asset management plan in place, and let's work together, and next year we're going to achieve it. And it's really this hand-in-hand collaboration, and always keeping the pressure on a corporate level so we have the right support. I think it's totally right.
Alex, whilst we're with you, I've got a question here from a member in the audience, and I'm going to direct this one to you because it's asked from the view of an asset manager. How is engineering services viewed in the eye of an asset manager? So is engineering included into the operational strategy? And if so, at what point?
Well, as asset managers, we should be very general, like we approach all different departments. But recently, because we're doing many hotel openings at the moment, a lot of renovation has been approved, and we're going through this. We beefing. We have more. Well, we have an incredible guy working with us who opened the Crillon Paris, the Carlton Cannes. Because you really need to coordinate all this. It's not an easy period, the pre-opening. There is never a role, a proper role that someone that coordinate everything. So you need a technicians here. I think it's really important. The same thing applies with CapEx. You need to do it the right way, and we have more and more CapEx nowadays. So that's also important. Yes.
Thank you. Thanks, Alex.
Eloise, if I could jump in there, I think it's engineering. All of those pieces are vital in the strategy, right? If the AC is not working, the most basic format, or the toilet paper roll is falling off the wall, and so it is all about that piece of guest experience. Certainly, the employee experience as well, right? It affects them. It affects them. They think about the property, our upkeep. Do they feel like there's value from working there? And so all of those interdepartmental pieces have to be part of that larger strategy, without a doubt.
Thank you. Thank you. Dina, I'm going to bring you into the conversation here, and I want to hear more about the licensing of the Stay Pineapple brand, and then moving and expanding your strategies with third-party owners. And I'm sure what Alex mentioned earlier about the shift between hotel management agreements to franchises is certainly something that will perk your ears. But what I'd like to know, Dina, is what prompted that decision to license the brand?
That's actually really tied into everything we've been talking about. It's interesting. We're currently an owner-operator brand. So we're completely vertical integration. We run our own restaurants. We do all of our own design. And it was in the marketplace a unique model. They exist. Peter does it as well. But pre-pandemic, we had a number of owners reaching out to us interested in the Stay Pineapple brand, had urban hotels, and so it sparked our interest. We were like, well, it's curious. We hadn't thought of that previously, because we started as a real estate company. So our owners are at our core, we're a real estate entity, and added hotel management because we couldn't find a hotel manager to do it the way we wanted it done. And then we started to build a brand, and people started to get interested, and we started to get what we call Stay Pineapple evangelists. And so it was a very organic growth. And we think that is what is the differentiator for third-party owners being interested, because we come from an owner perspective. We're not a traditional management company that doesn't own any real estate assets and doesn't come from that perspective. Our perspective is very much, how do we maximize the real estate owner's investment, right? But we do that through very, very careful operations. From guest satisfaction is our number one strategy. I was recently at a conference and heard an owner on a panel say, we think that the KPI of guest satisfaction scores is overblown, and we don't think it's that big of a deal. And my mouth about fell open. I was just like, it is the KPI. If that's not the KPI that's important in our industry, I don't know what is, right? 3 of our 10 hotels are in the top 10 in their market, not top 10 in their market segment, of the whole market. And for example, our one in San Diego is a limited service. It doesn't have a restaurant. It doesn't even have an exercise facility, for God's sake, but it beats out the luxury hotels in the market. And it's 100, I would love to say it's the beautiful hotel that we designed, but honestly, it is 100% the team that's at the hotel giving amazing friend style, high touch, personalized service every day. So that's really, I think, what is it concerns me when we start talking automation and keyless and touchless and no people. And I think as a brand, we're the antithesis of that. You won't see a kiosk in our hotels ever. You're not going to see a robot, I promise. You will get to talk to people. And more importantly, when you talk to people, those interactions, actually, you walk away from them re energized, engaged, feeling better, not I can understand sometimes what people want to put robots in hotels. When I check into, a standard brand hotel and uh, it's a lackluster experience. Well, that's not what the hotel business is about, we believe.
Mhm. On your point of maintaining that careful and consistent operational strategy, as the brand now moves into a period of scaling, how are you going to ensure those service standards and that guest satisfaction, which ultimately leads to loyalty, are going to be maintained and of a certain consistency?
Yeah, it's super important and it's not easy. So part of the special sauce is authentic guest experience, which means I don't write manuals. I don't tell our team members how to surprise and delight our guests. I give them a goal and I say, go listen to what you hear in the lobby. Don't eavesdrop, just listen. And find out something about your guest and go and surprise and delight them and engage them and make them excited. But I can't write that in a manual, right? Because it's how you were going to do it, not how I would do it. So what's really important for us is that we manage the hotels. So we're not going to franchise.
Mhm.
We specifically license our brand and only along with management. We've already had a number of us franchise and or have us manage but outsource everything because it's cheaper. And the answer is no. We're not even going to outsource housekeeping. An owner in New York was like, "Well, you pay your housekeepers too much," and I'm like, "That's how we have a great guest room experience because that
Mm.
guest room is immaculate and it's super clean, and those housekeepers take personal care of the rooms that they're assigned, and our housekeepers are assigned the same rooms all the time. These 12 rooms are my rooms, and they have a very engaged uh, interaction because of that. We have so many housekeepers that have worked for us for 20, 25 years. You don't get that by not paying them well, not taking care of them, giving them
Mm.
flexibility, doing all of the things that you would do. For us right now, the staffing crisis it's not the crisis that everybody else is having. When the pandemic ended, we rehired 80% of our team members that had been laid off during the pandemic. We also kept our hotels open. We never closed any of them. So we were able to hang on to some of the staff. So
Mm.
I think we all in the hospitality industry need to take a step back and remember sometimes why we work in this industry, and it's really about having personal interaction and building relationships with guests over the long haul.
Mhm. I'm going to follow up with a question to Peter shortly about company culture. But whilst I'm with you, Dina, how do you measure customer satisfaction, and what would be your top 3 KPIs then, if customer satisfaction is the number one?
Yeah. So we use a tool, an electronic tool like everybody else does. It aggregates all of the public commentary from guests that they put on any of the many, many um, uh, sources out there. And then we also do internal surveys. We just started that 2 years ago. We didn't do that previously. There was some concern that doing internal surveys would get guests to not do external facing ones as much, but we haven't found that to be true. And those internal surveys provide us a little more really actionable data. So we ask very specific questions. And it's not a lot. We keep it under 10 questions so we don't overwhelm people. That's always my number one suggestion around surveys is don't ever make them more than 10 questions. And those KPIs are really whether a guest would recommend us. That's our number one on the survey, because if a guest will recommend us, then we've done a really good job. The second is around cleanliness of the hotel and their experience in their room, really. And then the third is their interaction with team members. Those three, and I don't know that one is more important than the other, but that's kind of the triad of questions for us that really drive whether we nailed the experience or not. And that goes across our food and beverage operations. So that's another thing I think maybe we should all start calling them restaurants and not food and beverage operations, and they might make more money. But but everything we do and all of our strategies are across the hotel side and F&B operations.
Thanks, Dina.
Yeah.
Peter, let's bring you in here, and I really want to talk about company culture. I know that LARC has had a very interesting 3 years, and and has grown a fair bit and launched new products, etc. So what steps have you taken to protect that company culture during challenging times?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. It's if I go back to sort of what Alex and Pierre and Dina all touched on in one way, I agree with everything they said, but I take a slightly different lens and perspective on it. Alex talked about some of the challenges and started with labor as a place to sort of go, and Pierre highlighted the need for strategy, and Dina certainly talked about the employees, but really talked about measuring the where the guests are and the guest satisfaction. And you started really early in the conversation around purpose, right? And so we sort of stepped back and said, well, what is our purpose? And we can define that in so many ways, make money for owners, right? Drive to the bottom line, great products, wonderful locations, high design. But ultimately, that purpose, and I think what we forget to talk about in this industry, is that purpose needs to be shared down and with and through the line level. Because otherwise they're so far removed, right? And so it needs to be manageable, it needs to be direct, it needs to be actionable, it needs to be something everybody can hear, repeat, but more so engage and have as part of their value. And so ours is just taking care of each other. And so we flip it on its head and we say, yeah, the guests are wildly important, right? Because they're the ones paying the bills. But ultimately, the team is really the most important. If the staff is happy, if they're engaged, if they're empowered, if they're heard, if they're listened to, if they feel like they have not all of their stay prescribed in terms of what they have to do every moment of the day, but ultimately have the ability to manage their workflow and how they think is the right way in some ways, right? We still have to guide, give direction, and train. But ultimately, they then feel like they control their place a little bit. And ultimately, they're the ones that are going to drive the guest scores and the satisfaction and the environment for the guest. And so one way to get around labor is, sorry, my daughter has hers. I turned everything off except my daughter's walkie-talkies here. And so if the team is able to, if we listen to them and we ask them a lot of questions, and we hear their responses, and we think about what their day is like and how they're engaging one another, and we can get them to feel like they're valued through that active participation, it drives longevity, it drives institutional knowledge, it drives productivity. Cleanliness comes in line, right? But that interaction with the guest is ultimately what really gets to be better, because the team wants to be there, feels like they have the autonomy and the ability to not have a sense of prescribed service. I think that Dina did a nice job talking about that, right? Authentic service. We say non-prescribed service. But really, the team member can be as they are and engage the way they are. Sure, we need to go through and make sure they understand the role as all the best they can. But really, we think that if we get the team right, top down, bottom up, however you want to go about that, then the P&L comes in line, the cost centers come in line. They think about sort of the longer care. If we go back to that question around engineering, right? The team members more connected, the property's better taken care of. And so those pieces measure themselves in a much more efficient and productive way. And so I can go back and our team members can go back and our regionals can go back and our ops people can go back and actually follow KPIs, right? And really follow the line item. But instead of saying we have to go back and measure this line and change something operationally, what we need to do is affect conversation through strategy, through lineup, but not always talking about, oh, it's the guest that needs this, but more so to say, how do we as a team affect this? And what can we all do? What can you do? What are your ideas to be more productive? And that drives a value proposition that's really hard to measure. The way we measure it is lack of attrition, right? Guest satisfaction, but ultimately by having those team members in play for a much longer time.
Could you draw a connection between the company culture and growth, and how those steps have helped you grow?
Oh, without a doubt. So in the COVID, we were 20 properties. We're 55 now. We've got about 10 in our pipeline. We're and still really are pleased that we had shut down here in the Northeast. But every one of those GMs, except for 2 of our 20 locations, are still with us today. And so we know we can't grow unless those who are actually taking on that next location or moving into that next market are able to translate what we want to do and how we want to take care of the people that work with us, which ultimately translating to taking care of the guest. And so that piece of institutional knowledge in our systems, in our values, in our culture, in our articulation of service really stem from the ability of one team member to engage and teach and train and bring in that next team member. Otherwise, it's a bunch of us just showing up who maybe aren't connected and saying, this is what we want, but we have to be able to move those members one to the next. And so it goes back again to the value of the people. You can't grow without good people. We can force it. We can keep people in lanes. But I think you lose your soul a little over time. And that's kind of the goal. Do good work, take good care of people, and feel good about where we get at the end of the day, wherever that finish line is for us.
Thanks, Peter. I know we've talked a little bit about labour shortages, but I think that an overarching challenge at the moment is increased costs, and how inflation and increased costs are impacting a whole host, not just labour, but the supply chain and wider operations. And Alex, I'd like to ask you, if I may, how effective cost management can increase asset value, and what would you advise hoteliers if they could take anything away from this conversation today and act on it?
Before I do that, I want to put a kind of disclaimer, because I don't want to be the bad asset manager guy, and I'm not. And I want to say something to Dina and Peter. God, I love those true operators. I mean, this is like, I wish I could hear all the operators saying this. I told them during our COVID, you're going to break your software, and that's the most precious things we have. Don't destroy it, stop firing, train, keep them motivated, do like strategic plan in all departments and everything. When you were speaking, Dina, about housekeeping, we're actually insourcing housekeeping now in our luxury hotels in Paris, because it's like, we get better service. We know our clients better, and they are happier. And we forget that we in the service industry. And especially as I don't speak about you guys like the big boys, the big operators, they forget they're more of a database of loyalty programs, right? And sorry for the other guys that are on this side, but they forget that we're in the service industry, and as you say, Peter, this is top down. The service is come from the owner, come from the asset manager, all the way down to the guy at the bottom of the line, not the reverse. And I think we forget this. And for big operators, they, not all of them, they leave all this to the GM on site, and they get kind of left alone. So it's great that we hear this from Dina and Peter. I'm sorry for this disclaimer. I will answer your question now, and I will be the bad guy. So cut costs. Let's speak about labor straight away. This is the biggest income, the biggest cost that we have. I think is managing better and paying more the lower wages. I think it's really important, and I'm encouraging all my operators to do that. You know, one thing that we realize is the lack of control of productivity per department, per outlet. You know, in our hotels, we apply the productivity report similar to a P&L, where you can see all the departments, the outlets, line by line and vertically. And we can compare, I don't want to go too technically, but we can compare it what they did the previous month, the previous years and everything. And when you have this kind of control, that's allow you to spend money on training, on other things. And I think that's really, really important. So controlling your staff cost doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to lower by 20% our payroll, but it's better control. And I think we can do a better job with that. The other thing is, when we started through COVID, I said, let's do everything we need to cut costs, but let's not touch the software. Let's start with what we can do in the back of the house and everything. So we renegotiated, and we should continue to do that, renegotiated all our maintenance contracts and reduce the suppliers, for example. Doesn't impact your software. We told also our team members is like, listen, we know exactly how many guests we will have in the room. So instead of putting 4 towels, what are you going to put 2 towels and 2 bathrobe and everything? This is a small thing. The guest doesn't mind. It doesn't impact the software so much, and it saves us a lot of money at the end of the year. Another thing is look at your menu, do menu engineering, remove the dish that are, you know, very costly and keep the one that are very successful. Also look on grid energies. We all know that putting solar panels save money, so put solar panels. And you know, I don't want to go through the list of LED and everything, but this is a no-brainer. It doesn't impact the software. And by the way, I had prepared my little list here. So regarding cost, it's really what I mean is don't touch your software. Also speak with your staff. They can come up with some pretty brilliant ideas to cut costs, things that are not necessary. Trust them and always tell them, if you have a magic wand, what would you do? What would you change? And they come up with crazy ideas, but some of them we can implement, and it's like, wow, and then empower them. Also look at preventive maintenance. I can go on cutting costs. See, it's not all bad guy or asset manager here.
You're saving the planet too, Alex.
That's right. One, just as a couple of notes, but interesting. Alex, we work with some asset managers, and it's not the evil piece at all. It really actually can keep us sharp because there's questions that can get asked that are non-emotional, right? Just about the business. And so I think that there's real value for our audience to understand that working with an asset manager makes you better. It really should. An interesting side note, when we think about kind of the P&L from 2011, really for us all the way through 22, a blip in the summer of COVID, but otherwise in our sector, back half of 20 was actually pretty strong. 21 was a monster. 22 is even bigger. But I remember in the fall, so when we look at our managers and our operators, most of them had never managed in a downturn, year-on-year growth, right? And so what they didn't learn along the way is operational numbers kept coming in line because top line kept producing, right? It didn't mean that they were getting better operationally from a control standpoint. It just meant that mistakes maybe were hidden or costs were in line because top line kept growing. Last fall, I said, guys, look, we're going to be in a different year. And so as a culture, as a company culture, this may feel different because we're going to talk about the middle in a different way. So part of that's about education, preparation, and understanding that as we talk about these things, it's not a net effect on you as an employee, as a negative, but how do we actually educate you and allow you to be a better operator and in a place where you want to be. But no matter what, we still have to talk about these types of things. And so, you know, you think about labor, you think about scheduling to the 15 minutes, right? You think about scheduling to the 5 minutes. And so there are so many tactics and places to sort of manage these lines. But if you don't have good dialogue, but in trust with the employee around what the job is, how the function of the job works, the amount of time they need, and to be able to talk about, and somebody had said, ask them, right? They know how to clean a room better than I know how to clean a room. But ultimately the question is, how do we clean a room in a more efficient way without you feeling like all we're doing is piling more rooms on you, right?
No. Yeah. No, thank you, Peter. Thanks for sharing your insights on that one. I want to we've been talking about cost management and P&L, and I want to shift the conversation slightly to explore revenue, particularly new revenue streams. And I'd like to loop Pierre back in here and talk about the opportunities in creating new revenue streams. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I suppose with the change in the game during COVID and the fact that some services just couldn't operate because of, you know, physical contact and all of that, people have had to be very, very creative about the use of space. And it's probably accelerated the thinking around maximizing space that I suppose came from the real estate sector, from some of the the bad guys that Alex was mentioning, chasing every dollar out of every square meter, which is not necessarily a bad thing, as Peter said, when some of the questions are just very honest as to, are we using this space the right way? Are we not wasting this space? Can we help our clients better? I think, and I'll link that back to what Peter and Dina both said. Where do you source the intel? Is someone going to come and tell you how to make more money? I don't think so. I think it's part of the ongoing sort of strategy, which is know what's going on. Know what's going on inside your hotel in terms of where the revenues are generated, how the hotel is being used and valued by your client, what services do they like, what spaces do they use? That's one thing. What are the guys around you doing, as in your competitors? Are they doing anything creative and creating new services or new uses of space? Clever. But also know your neighbors. There might be services that are either opening up, that are showing you trends that, why not? You're a hotel, you are staffed 24/7. You could catch, you could use, you have the infrastructure, maybe a kitchen that you can use for catering. You know, loads of resources in a hotel are there, and you pay for them on an ongoing basis, regardless of the usage. So that thinking should lead you to observe around you, at your hotel, around, and see how you can bring in those services. And I would say with an extra layer of thinking, how can you bring in the services and the revenues in a way that enhances your customer experience, generates revenues, but doesn't add or very little additional operational complexity? Because you can also become a bit of a king of a very small kingdom and say, well, I want to do everything. I want to do everything for everyone. And we know that strategically doesn't work. And Alex, I think, would agree with me, cost revenue management wise, it just doesn't work. You're trying to be everything for everybody, and it's very costly, ends up very costly. So I think, again, going back to the other points that have been made, it's all about sourcing the ideas from your staff, because they are the ones that observe the customers and how they use the spaces. It's making everybody responsible for competition monitoring. Your restaurant staff should be, hopefully, going around places, trying restaurants, seeing how how the others are doing, and how creative they are with the service delivery, with the products, the menu engineering, all of those ideas. But it's also putting yourself in the shoes of the customer. What do I need? I had an example recently. I went to my corner shop and here in the UK, and I realized how the Amazon lockers and some of those things have just mushroomed in all those corner shops. It's tiny, but it generates a huge amount of money for them, and they are there and they're open. So they can make that money without much additional cost or logistical complication. So I think this is that. And then going beyond this is, how can you leverage partnerships? How can you be part, and I assume the hotels, Dina and Peter, are the same. They're part of the fabric of the neighborhood and the area. And there's an excellent way to doing this is commercial partnerships. I can extend the experience in the destination. I can take part in the revenue sharing of such exercise without adding cost or complexity to my hotel. And ultimately, asset managers will know that. You can look at insourcing some of the activities, but also leasing out some of the spaces that you don't think you're the best user, but you think someone could very well maximize the space, bring a new service, depending on their responsibility for capital investment that might be off your shoulders for a little while as well, to refocus your attention and your money towards your core activity, whilst the customer sees just a better hotel and better services. So I think it's just being connected to your neighborhood and linking that to your strategy, but always via the channel of your staff. They are the best source of information.
Mm-hmm.
I have a couple of very specific examples that has come to us recently that might be interesting to people. Top Golf is interested in some of our meeting space. If anybody's familiar with Top Golf, part of the reason we're kind of interested in it is it would also add to our food and beverage operation. So the property that we were looking at is adjacent to our F&B outlet. The other interesting one was a micro theater, so movie theater, but they have just 1 or 2 theaters. And apparently this is, I don't know anything about the movie business, but this is an emerging segment, at least in the US, where mega theaters are becoming less popular, and these little community-based micro theaters where there's 1 show being played, but it's a regular show that's out in the movies at the time. So a couple interesting ideas.
I just wanted to mention something here, because again, you see the creativity in Dina's side, and when you have a small operator, they getting this creativity. It's not coming from Dina, I'm sure, but it's coming from the team. And I think that's really important. That's one thing that we put always in place when we start the first month a new assignment. We give them like a template to our big hotels, the larger hotels, obviously, and we say, listen, there is about 10 pages. Put your sales initiatives in there. And what we realize is those bigger operators, they just want to plug in the system and they wait that the demand comes. And it's like, this is not how we do business. And you need to generate this demand. You need to be creative. If you don't have a fashion week in your city, well, create one of those. Go and travel and see your clients to make sure they come. You cannot just plug in and go. And over the 16 years that we have Global Asset Solution, is that we created like a list, I think it's 50 pages of sales initiatives, and we usually send this to the operators after six months after we can assess them, and they just pick ideas, and they're coming from a hotel we have a Rosewood in Cambodia to hotels in Madrid or Paris. It's very wide, and they pick and choose what they want, but they don't have this creativity on a big corporate level. And I think that's missing, and there's an opportunity here that we should learn from Dina and Peter, because they have beautiful opportunities to generate more revenue.
Thanks, guys. And I hope that's provided some good examples of how hoteliers are using and maximizing excess space. We had a question come in earlier about about using excess capacity to include advertising or goods or services for staff or guest use. And I know we've just covered a wide range of examples there. But I want to focus on Dina and Peter for my next question. It is tied into what we've just been talking about. Would you consider outsourcing as an effective way to reduce costs? And if so, in what areas of your hotel operations?
We've only outsourced in 2 locations, and it's been around labor really because of a need for, and I don't mean to oversimplify this, purely a body, right? But good bodies, right? We've certainly outsourced in a good way. But otherwise, no. We've looked at leasing restaurants and other pieces, and we believe that it is vital to keep that under our umbrella to control the connection to the operation, to the value, to the culture, to the place, to the sense of place, to the location. And it certainly stops the whose job is it sort of piece. You end up with 2 teams, 2 staffs many times, a division for the guest of, they'll say, well, I need this question answered. And somebody will say, well, that's the F&B side or wherever else. And so it's not in our wheelhouse to think about it like otherwise. It doesn't mean it may never come, but no. Dean, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we're the same way. We don't outsource anything. In fact, we only have one outsourced restaurant in our entire portfolio, and it's only because the restaurant had been there for 20 years when we bought the hotel. It was a fixture in the market, and it actually has, you wouldn't even know it's part of our hotel because it has an external entrance. No, we do everything in-house. We look at it from the perspective of you can't control experience for the team member and you can't control the experience for the guest if they aren't your team members. Like I can't work with a third party restaurateur and explain surprise and delight to them and friend style service and try to get them on board when they have their own perspective and their own methodology of how they're doing things. I mean, like, I mean, it won't ever happen. I'm sure it will, but it's not our business for sure.
Dina, whilst we're with you, I want to ask you a closing question, if I may, seeing as you focused on KPIs earlier. But I'd like to ask you why has the value of data increased, and how is that shaping operational strategies?
Yeah, data, I talked about automation earlier and it not being a piece of our business model with guests. On the opposite side, it is absolutely a piece of our back office. So where we want to use data and automation and ChatGPT and everything else that we can is to help the team members' experience be more efficient and effective and an easier to do their job. Give them more time to interact with guests. Surprise and delight, I mentioned a couple times. It is our one of our core features as a brand, and I talk about it as one of the benefits for team members, not for guests, because it literally provides the opportunity for every team member to do what we all went into hospitality for, right? To engage with somebody, do something special for them, go and get them something, or add an experience to their stay with us. We don't have a budget for surprise and delight. That's one of the things that I always get asked, oh, well, what's the budget? There isn't one. If there's a budget, then it's not surprise and delight. Like nobody has ever spent too much money. I've told every general manager, if you spend too much money on surprise and delight, I will let you know. Until then, please just keep doing it. Go out of your way to do whatever it is. Those things are so important. And the best way for us to be able to do them is if we have data. if we know about the guests. So we have thousands of Stay Pineapple evangelists, people that stay with us all the time with only 10 hotels. And many of those guests we know very well. We know their daughter, we know what their dog's name is because we're dog obsessed. And we know that their husband's birthday is next week. We know all of those things. And the more we know about them, the more we can personalize the service at our hotels. So data is 100% one of the biggest strategies we use. Our CRM system is the heart of our house for sure.
I just have a quick thought to piggyback on that. We can keep converting guests that are internal. Our team members do that really well, right? But the data on the external side is to fill in all the gaps that we measure. I think that people forget on the hospitality side, our inventory expires all the time. Our 2,000 room nights, right? If we're running half full, we have 1,000 room nights unsold, right? Every day. 2,000 seats in restaurants across the board, right? Every chair, if we can't flip it 2 or 3 times a day, it expires in the moment, right? And so we have to understand the data behind that to drive new people in. And then on the guest experience side, the team is what keeps those people coming back. But we have to have that data in order to keep pushing people back in and through.
Thank you. Thanks, Dina. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Pierre. We have fast got to our allotted hour for this webinar. So I'm going to ask my team to bring up the PowerPoint, but I will flag here that we're going to leave this webinar open for an extra 2 minutes right at the end for our audience members to follow up on any of the links that we've popped into the chat. And as I mentioned earlier, the LinkedIn profiles of our speakers are also in the chat there if you want to carry on that conversation. There is plenty that we did not discuss today, so I definitely suggest you get on and do that. But before we close off today, I just want to highlight the next webinar. We have partnered with Cvent to discuss, as we just were, the power of automation, but in this time, in driving mice business, and that's taking place on the 25th of September at a slightly different time of 1 o'clock BST. And if you'd like to register, the link to do so has been popped into the chat. If you're interested in working with Boutique Hotel News across our webinar series or bespoke webinars like the one I've just highlighted with Cvent, then please do get in touch. My colleague Jordan and Piers' details have been popped up on the PowerPoint there. We'd love to hear from you. So all that's left for me to do now is to say thank you. Thank you to my panelists. What an insightful discussion we have had today. Dina, huge thanks to yourself for getting up super early and participating in this chat. You can follow BHN on all of the social media channels that's up on your screen now. But thank you for tuning in. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to Alliance. I will see you on the 25th of September. Goodbye, farewell, and I will see you all again very soon. Take care.